lot of visas. So I was doing a lot of interviews,
Mm,
but nothing for like, not like a journalist or anything like that.
gotcha.
Live.
No one?
Mm-hmm.
Well, good evening to our Semester at Sea community for our latest installation of our Wavelengths series. I am Kyle Koelbel, president of the Semester at Sea Alumni Association. And this evening, I have the pleasure of talking with Cameron Thomas-Shah, who is a alum of our spring 2010 voyage. Welcome, Cameron.
Hey Kyle, how you doing? Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. For those of you who aren't too familiar with Cameron, you're missing out. He is currently a Foreign Service Officer for the State Department. Before that, he was a Deputy Cultural Attaché for the U.S. Consulate General in Karachi, Pakistan. He was, prior to that, a Cultural Attaché for the U.S. Embassy in Honduras, was a Vice Consul for the U.S. Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City. He worked at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, and he interned with the U.S. Department of State as a Press and Cultural Fellow, as well as a Secretariat staff. Cameron obtained a BA of International Studies from Morehouse College, and as well as a Master's in American Foreign Policy from the Johns Hopkins University. Man, that is quite a resume that you have put together, and you're only in your early 30s.
That's right.
It's a lot. That's a lot to go through. I was looking all that up, and I was going, "Wow, Cameron has done."
It's been fun. But what's not included is my semester at sea experience was phenomenal, and it really kind of put me on that path to do all of those things. So that's why I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, I couldn't list that off because we've got you here personally to tell us all those stories. So I couldn't ruin all that. We had to give the backstory of your resume.
Right.
And yeah, with that, as we get to it, I was curious, really, when did your interest in foreign policy start? Like, when did that become a passion for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess it was during college. I was fortunate enough to be the recipient of one of the State Department's fellowships. I was a Thomas-Shah Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellow, and I got that when I was an undergrad. And it was through that mechanism that I started to learn more about international relations. I'd already had a history of public service. I'd volunteer with a lot of nonprofit organizations. I work in civic organizations like the NAACP, and like yourself, I was very active in my community and loving travel already at that age and curious about the world. Going into foreign policy, going into international relations was just a natural next step. And it was because of the Pickering Fellowship that I was able to do semester at sea. It was because of that opportunity that I was able to, have a lot of those opportunities overseas and at Johns Hopkins University as well.
That's awesome. I hadn't heard about the Pickering Fellowship before. Could you expand on what that is a little bit more for us?
Sure. So the Thomas-Shah Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship is one of the State Department's fellowships to increase diversity and inclusion into the foreign affairs community. It was started by Thomas-Shah Pickering, who's a very prestigious 4-time, maybe 5-time ambassador for the United States. And it was his vision and the vision of the people within the State Department during that time that the diplomatic corps needed to be more reflective of the United States. And, through that mechanism, it's given a lot of young people of color and women and people from different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, the opportunity to serve overseas as a diplomat. And I'm thankful for that opportunity. If anyone who's watching is interested, you can go to pickeringfellowship.org. I think that's the right website, and apply. I think you have to be interested in pursuing your master's degree in international relations. And then after that, you will be career conditional after finishing a few steps to become a foreign service officer.
How did you hear about that to begin with?
So it was interesting. I had mentors at Morehouse who were interested in international relations. There were a few guys who were Pickering fellows, and a mentor of mine kind of told me about it. He said, if you're interested in international relations, you may want to check out this fellowship. You wanted to check this out. I was slated, if you remember back to when we were in college, let's see, this was 2008. and I had a summer boot camp at Goldman Sachs. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go work on Wall Street. This is just kind of at Morehouse during that time. That's what you did. You got your business degree. And the next summer, I was slated to do another banking internship overseas in Mauritius, actually. And, the bottom fell out of the economy all over the world, and the bank folded. And I was so upset that I didn't get a chance to visit Mauritius, more so than I didn't get this internship. I just wanted to see Mauritius. I wanted to go speak French and be on a beach and have some cultural exchange that I didn't even think about the business side of it. And my mentor, he says, you've demonstrated a passion for international affairs. I think that this opportunity, given your background, given your interests, would be a good fit. And he was right. And, to this day, I think that was one of the best decisions I ever made.
So were you then trying to find a study abroad that took you to Mauritius, and that's how you found Semester at Sea?
So the story about how I found Semester at Sea, it dovetails right into that story. So because that internship didn't happen, I ended up coming back down to university early in the summer to work in the study abroad office to prepare for the fall study abroad fair. And it was at that study abroad fair that I met the recruiter for Semester at Sea. He and I talked for a bit, and I'm helping him set up his table. And he goes to the bathroom. He says, Cameron, can you watch my table? If anybody comes by, just give them a pamphlet. So I'm standing there for about 5 minutes just reading the Semester at Sea pamphlet. I'm saying, this is remarkable. What is this? What's this Semester at Sea thing? And the next year, that was 2000. The next year was 2010, and I went on the voyage.
I mean, that's amazing. It's a good thing he left you by yourself to just read the pamphlet on your own.
Exactly.
For that, I mean, what sold you about the program of Semester at Sea versus doing more of a traditional international city 3-month stay type of study abroad?
Yeah, so I was looking at two programs actually. One was in China, and one was in the other one was Semester at Sea. The China program, I mean, it was great. I probably would be, fluent in Chinese right now and maybe working there. But I think the Semester at Sea gave me more options. It was something that provided what I think I really needed. You get a very multifaceted understanding of the world, and the consequence, which I didn't realize at that, looking back 10 years, I think the best part about it was not just that the world was our classroom, was that you met people from so many different backgrounds from across the United States. And I think that was the most important part. I mean, I loved traveling the world. I loved all of our experiences on that voyage, but it was the friendships that came out of that. The fact that, I'd never known anyone from Seattle or Denver or Arizona. I knew people from the East Coast and the Midwest, but the fact that we were all having this shared experience in the world, forming our own opinions, and we're all in our early 20s. So none of us are taking ourselves too seriously, but our hearts and our minds are open. And I think that's what really built a great bond between, all of us.
What are a couple of those memories that really stand out to you from the voyage?
Oh man, the ones that I could share now, I would say definitely the first trip to Vietnam. When we arrived in Ho Chi Minh City, we had an opportunity to go to the Mekong Delta, and just spending the night there and being like in the rice paddies of southern Vietnam, it was just beautiful. And we kind of grow up with this understanding, a very cursory understanding of the Vietnam War, but you never really learn about the Vietnamese people. And just interacting with folks that you never really knew, having an understanding about their way of life, happiness, and then learning about the war from their perspective, I thought was remarkable, because I think that how we went to school and the way that we learn things, we learn in a very unique perspective, and that perspective is not always shared all over the world. And that opened my eyes up to more empathy of other people and other ways of life. I'd had international experiences before Semester at Sea, but that was such a markedly different culture to have experienced. And I really fell in love with it. And And subsequently, I went back, and we can talk about that later. But also, when we were in Hyderabad, India, we had the opportunity to volunteer at a girls' shelter and to speak to them about the importance of education. Going to Mauritius, finally making it to Mauritius, and this was a part of my class, one of the classes I took on the voyage, but it was the first time I'd been to a mosque, and learning about Islam and learning about Hadith and learning about Islam at a time where there were a lot of challenges going on around the world, and to learning what this religion was all about, to me, was very eye-opening. Also, being a Black American, going to Ghana, going to West Africa, and connecting with Africans, and understanding what the diaspora was. I mean, I went to a Black college, so you have Morehouse brothers who are from almost every continent, but there's something about yearning for that connection to Africa that was really great. One, I'll be remiss to not share an on-ship memory that I really cherish, and that's the intramural basketball. And so, here I am, I'm on this intramural basketball 5-on-5 on the ship, circumnavigating the world with my friends, Brooke, Corey, Graham, and Eric, and we won the championship. And so we deemed ourselves, we're the world champions of basketball. And that's just more of a testament to the relationships that you have, not in those countries, but on the ship. But I would say that those are definitely some of my best experiences.
Yeah, I remember Vietnam really was quite eye-opening. When I talked with a man there who told me the story of being a little child in their house when a soldier came in and killed his father in front of him. Right. And he looked at me and he went, just because that happened between my dad and someone your dad's age doesn't mean we can't be friends.
Right.
And that statement to me just was so resounding, of just because it was something from past generations that happened where there was that conflict, there's no reason that you and I can't sit down today and talk and get to know each other and build a different understanding. And that comment still resonates with me today.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
It was something else. I mean, there are those stories. I mean, we all have those stories, and they go on for days and days. There are a lot of students, though, that are still wondering, why would I go do a semester at sea versus just going to Barcelona or Shanghai or over to England? I mean, what advice would you give them as to why semester at sea presents that different opportunity?
That's a great question. So, after semester at sea, I did a lot of traveling, right? So our teacher for global studies was Don Gagniak, right? And he was always full of these quips, right? And one of them was, never let your age outpace the number of countries you visited. Yeah. And I took that to heart, and I just kept traveling. What semester at sea offers that maybe one or two country study abroad doesn't is, once again, you're going to be outside of your comfort zone in one way or another always, and you won't expect it. So it's easy. And, if you go to a different country, you always see, the Americans, eventually they all are hanging out together, right? Because they identify themselves as outside of a culture, and they decide they have a very narrow experience within the culture. You go to Barcelona, you're just going to do the party stuff. In Barcelona, you may go to the Spanish class. What semester at sea offers is that even though you're with other Americans, you're with a very diverse group of Americans, and you all are so open-minded and open-hearted that you force yourselves to do all of these very different experiences. To what Don Gagniak used to say, to be adventurers, right? We're adventurers. We're not tourists. When you're a study abroad in Barcelona or somewhere just one time, you're just a tourist for a semester. But we were forced to be adventurers. Everything was a learning experience that you can bring to the classroom and write about it and reflect on it. I'll never forget when we went to, I won't talk about the country or the person, but there was someone who witnessed something that she'd never witnessed before, and it deeply affected her. And the way that she spoke about it in class, she's like, from the town that I'm from, that's something that would have never happened. And to this day, I'm sure that's something that has changed her worldview. Although we feel like we can be constricted in our bubble, right? We used to call the ship was our, the great mom, everything like that. That wasn't everyone's jam. You have a lot of people that spend all their time on the shore. They would find themselves in all these different cultural exchanges and doing these homestays. But can you imagine doing a homestay in China, then doing a homestay in Vietnam, and then a homestay in Ghana, then a homestay in Brazil? What you're going to get away, what are you going to take back to, University of Colorado or Morehouse College from that experience? It's going to be a lot different from maybe just a semester in Bologna or a semester in Barcelona.
And I know during that course and some of that unique experience on the ship, you took the USChina Relations course that we were fortunate to have during our program.
Right.
Could you expand a little more about what that course was for you?
Yeah, so I felt like I was a rising junior, so I took some pretty rigorous courses. So I took the Pakistan course, I took the US-Sino Relations course, I took philosophical literature, and I did a lot of writing. But what the US-China course, I think, gave me, during that time, as China has been for the last maybe 25, 30 years, a country particularly fascinating for Americans, and especially young people who are interested in international affairs. So it gave you a really great insight. We had two great scholars, Dr. Shundeng Li and Dr. John Israel. Both of them were they were China hands. One's a Chinese scholar, one's a China hand. And they gave us a very unique firsthand perspective of what was going on in the country during that time. What they did predict was exactly what we're seeing. You're seeing China take a more serious international position, right? And we also had the opportunity to go to Hong Kong, learn about the economic system. We sat with, I think, C.Y. Tung, C.T. Tung, who's a big shipping magnate, son of a big shipping magnate, very influential person in the government. And it presented to us a very academic and cultural understanding of a country that I think a lot of us didn't know that well. I'd taken Chinese at Morehouse, but to actually go there and interact with the people and have kind of an academics exchange there with students and government officials, it felt, now looking back, it felt like I was a diplomat then, because you're engaging in very interesting discourse with very important people in the country about pertinent topics.
How did that experience, I mean, to be a rising junior in college and feel as though you're a diplomat then, how much did that help you as you continued down the road to wanting to work in the State Department foreign policy? How much did that experience with Semester C and that program on the ship help you down that process?
All right. Let me first say that anything I say, I'm saying in my personal capacity, and my views or any statements I make do not reflect anything like any viewpoint of the U.S. Department of State. But I would say that what was great, the ship. So we used to do the interport, the briefings, right? The diplomatic briefings in some ports. And so some foreign service officers would come on board. They'd tell us, this is what's going on in the country. These are the places that you want to stay away from. This is the phone number to the embassy. This is how you get in contact with us. And to me, that was really fortunate. And I had the opportunity to talk to almost every person that gave us a diplomatic briefing. I think more than anything, meeting those foreign service officers and seeing them in action and seeing that they would even take the time to come on a ship and talk to a bunch of college students showed just their dedication to public service. And then being in all these different countries and engaging with people. Most of my job is not necessarily talking with government officials. It's not talking with, heads of companies. It's talking to normal people. It's talking, it's relating to folks and telling them about me and learning about them. And that's basically what I did for a semester. And it was great because I would write about it. We read the literature, then we go into the country, or we go into the country and then come back and make reflections. I think that it informs you, just like the same thing I did, same thing I said in the teaser for this talk. It informs a worldview. Some people did not have a worldview. Some of our friends had never left the United States before. Some of us had seen the world, but we hadn't had that, I guess, well-rounded understanding of really what the world was like. And the more that you're able to fill in those missing pieces, and the more that you're able to put a face to a country or a culture, I think the more you are prepared to engage with people who don't share the same background as you do, and you can connect with them. And I'm blessed because I have the opportunity to do that on behalf of my country.
I mean, in all the travels on the ship, I mean, what culture really stood out to you that took you off guard?
It took me off guard.
It surprised you?
It didn't surprise me, but I did have a very strong connection with Vietnam. Just because, it was just that I was in the Mekong and just learning a very different view of history. I went back to Vietnam for an internship 2 years later. I went back to Vietnam for my first assignment in the Foreign Service. I'm going back to Vietnam again. The country is just such a, it's a dynamic economy. It's a rich culture. The language is really interesting as well. And I think that when you meet people who specialize in a particular region of the world, it's always those experiences. It's, they went someplace and they engaged with someone, and it just, they hit a switch. Oh, this is great. I can get with this. And, living there and visiting there and then having lived there, it remained, Vietnamese people are very nice. They have a very interesting history. The food is great. And the politics are interesting. The social cultural study of the country is fascinating. And, the same thing that you said when you met Vietnamese people during our voyage is that we have a very good relationship with the Vietnamese. And we have a big diaspora here in the United States as well.
I mean, getting back to Vietnam, were you just fortunate that when you worked for the vice consul that you were able to go work in Ho Chi Minh, or was that something you really pushed for to try and get back to?
I made my preferences known. I made my preferences known, and and you never really know why you end up being chosen to go to a particular place. But I think maybe during that time I may have been best suited to be there.
Having spent time there previously in that country, does that help somewhat in what you were trying to do down the road, that you had some experience with the culture and the people?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's funny because, in a lot of different careers in international relations, whether you're a foreign service officer or you're working at a think tank, you may not necessarily work on the area of your expertise because maybe you've been hired as a generalist like me. If you're doing customized research and you study the economy of Southeast Asian nations, yes, you're going to be chosen to go to Vietnam. That wasn't me.
You weren't quite so specialized in it?
You're right, I wasn't quite so special.
And being able to put your feet on the ground is always one of those biggest experiences. As you were working towards your bachelor's in international studies at Morehouse, how much did those in-port experiences help to expand upon the book learning that you were getting on campus in Atlanta?
I think it meant a lot. So I'd had a good foundation of American foreign policy, international studies before I went. Semester at sea definitely gave me a really great opportunity to learn more about South Asia, for example. We were studying international, we were doing a lot of theory, we were doing a little policy work, but there was no class on Pakistan, for example. And it's interesting because the final paper I wrote for the Pakistan class, became the abstract for my master's thesis,
Oh, wow.
because I was just so interested in learning more about Pakistani culture, more kind of the political system, and I studied it, and it informed a lot of my academic work, not just at Morehouse, but even in my master's program.
So, I mean, while we weren't able to get to Pakistan during the voyage, how were you able to kind of expand upon that experience with some of that culture while we were in port in places?
Right. So, from the South Asia perspective, we did visit India, so we did learn about the issues going on the subcontinent from the Indian perspective, and then during that time there was a lot of unknowns, especially among other college students, about Islam, and so that was that we had the opportunity to take to visit the mosque in Mauritius. We learned a lot about some of the political issues by talking with Pakistanis who were living in both countries. But a lot of what we focused on in the Pakistan class was U.S. foreign policy with Pakistan, and so it was great to have someone who was so knowledgeable, like Dr. Richard Barnett, who's at the University of Virginia, who had lived in Pakistan and spoke Urdu and knew people there, and so he was able to make connections wherever we needed to someone he knew or some expertise that he had. And even though we didn't make it to Pakistan, he definitely brought us there in the classroom.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and now I'm working there. So there's just like Vietnam, the semester C's had such a significant influence on my professional life. I'd be remiss to say otherwise.
So, that Pakistan class you did and the research paper that led to your master's thesis on that, did that help with the position that you were able to get in Pakistan?
Not at all. 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 Like I said, the thing is, we're generalists. So, if I am interested in working in a particular part of the world, it helps maybe when you're interviewing for the job, but it definitely doesn't guarantee.
Just gives you that passion to keep pushing and pushing to
exactly.
get the assignment.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you were talking that your professor knew some Urdu. Listening to you, you have lived in countries that all have varying languages to that. How have you been able to accommodate and kind of work within going from Vietnamese to Spanish to Urdu to English to French? It's a lot of languages to keep up with.
Yeah, right. I think that's one of the special things about this career is that they'll train you. I get a lot of training. When you're working in country, you get a chance to use it as much as you can, and when you meet people, they keep you honest. How's your Vietnamese? Anh bạn có nói bằng tiếng Việt không? Đúng, bạn có nói. So it's at the end of the day, it's all about the people, right? Don said that. We learned that it's really always about the people. Semester C highlights the people that you're on the ship with. It highlights the people that you create connections with when you go visit those countries. And so, when you create such strong relationships, the language is even that more important.
Did you develop more of a passion of wanting to actually learn more of some of the languages as we went from country to country, and not wanting to be that American tourist who just speaks loud English? Did it really give you that passion of, I want to learn some of these languages and be able to get around to have some of those conversations and interactions? Did it just...
You know what? Probably down the line it did. We weren't, I wasn't, I think when we were in South Africa, we loved it was around the time that the World Cup, so everyone was easy on top. We were singing like different songs, but I'm not sure that I was trying to, pick up Portuguese when we were in Brazil, or trying to, dust off my Hindi when we were in India. But I think, when you have that experience in the country, it's not so unfamiliar, so it's not scary. So the first time I took the Vietnamese class, I wasn't afraid of it. I knew, I was like, okay, well, I kind of know, what it sounds like. I kind of know, I kind of have a feeling for the language, and so I'm ready to jump in.
What's next on the language list to learn?
I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna perfect my Vietnamese now.
Okay.
That's the goal. Perfect my Vietnamese, and so when I'm there, I won't have to pull out my dictionary app all the time.
Well, at least that's a little easier than the books we used to carry around.
I mean, think about it. Technology's come a long way in the last 10 years we were on the voyage. Like I don't remember even using my cell phone that much.
No, we didn't even have our cell phones. It was taking the green sheet and the notes that you wrote down of how to pronounce certain phrases to get
Exactly.
around from that. There was now when we were out in I was up in Copenhagen the other year, and it's like I don't speak this, I don't read this, but I was able to take Google Translate and just hover over some of the signs to understand what was going on. I don't even know what it would be like to do the voyage and have that resource available.
That's incredible. So actually, I went back for so I did spring 2010, but I also went back with Morehouse. We did an enrichment voyage in the winter of 2010 as well. So I went back I think about 5 or 6 months after we got back, and they had, internet. I remember now on our voyage, we didn't even have internet. They had unlimited internet. These guys were a little bit younger than me, so they had all their phones, and I mean, and that was just 6 months later. So when you're doing that, and I think they did I think they did on purpose, right? You work on the alumni committee, so you talk to the higher ups, but uh, I don't think I could imagine not having my cell phone and access to internet all the time now, and I think that probably contributed immensely to the connections that we made because we weren't distracted by what people were doing on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. You get like maybe 20 minutes a day to update your blog and check your email, and that was about it.
Yeah, it forced a little more to immerse into the conversations and the culture and the people with it.
Right.
I mean, as much as you have that connectivity now, though, as you're working and living in these different countries, do you appreciate having that much of it, or do you at times wish that there was a little less that you could just spend a little more time in the moment of of where you're at?
That's a good question. I definitely think that technology distracts from more people to people connections. We use it as a tool to engage with larger audiences, right? Whether you're using your own personal Facebook, we're doing Zoom right now to make sure that
Yeah.
we can engage with with other alumni and people who are considering the voyage. But once again, like when you're on the ground, there's nothing like sitting down with somebody and breaking bread and just kind of figuring out who they are and where they come from. And I think fundamentally that's what I love. That's what I'm passionate about. And I was able to do that with y'all on that voyage. And that's what it was all about. That's what I think that's what's so special about Semester at Sea is that you can be with somebody who you would never hang out with because they're from a different background or a different part of the country. And you can go and you can meet someone on the other side of the world who you probably never have met if you stayed in your hometown or your home state. And you take that experience with you. And you do that 10 times. You did it in Japan, China, Vietnam, India, Mauritius, South Africa, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Brazil. And then, your whole worldview has been changed. And it was such a beautiful thing.
And it's at times, yeah, it's hard to think back to like what was even the perspective beforehand, before you had those stories and those life-changing experiences with those individuals. It's even hard to think of, it's more scary to think of who would I be if I didn't have those. I don't know if I'd like the person I would be if I didn't have those experiences with those individuals breaking bread like we did. I mean, I remember being in India and a group of us ended up having dinner at a local guy's house, met his family, his wives, his children and nephew, and sat on his rooftop. And he wouldn't let us buy any of the food because he went, we are now friends. And this is what friends do for each other. You get together and you sit and you have a meal together. And this is what we should be doing. And I mean, to a guy that you met a couple days before, to have that experience and you go, how often are we doing that type of thing within our own friend groups, our communities. Like I think to having dinner with Johnny Boy, doing that, and a couple of us frequently. And it's amazing what it does. I mean, you've had far more of those experiences than most of us through just beyond the voyage to where you were working and where you were stationed and all the travels that you've done from it. I mean, how much have those personal experiences really impacted your professional understanding of what you should be doing in your job?
I think it's, you get a stronger understanding and a value for things that are markedly like our values, right? Like human rights, right? You understand, having, interacted with, minority community, religious minorities in certain parts of the world, or, ethnic minorities on certain parts of the world, just disadvantaged groups from all the places that we went to, the kids that we met in South Africa who were, from the townships, the kids that we met and the people that we met when we were in Salvador Bahia in Brazil, who were from the favelas, the girls that I was talking about earlier who were at the orphanage in Hyderabad. These are some of the most vulnerable people in the world. And the opportunity to engage with them, you understand the importance of just protecting basic human rights, basic human dignity. And I'm fortunate because I do see the importance of that through the lens of my profession, and I do see all the good stuff that goes on, and I work towards it. When I did the winter voyage, we went through Central America, and I would later on go to serve in Honduras, and I didn't know. When we were on the voyage, we were in so Roatan is where the ship docked, and Roatan is it's a beautiful island that I spent a lot of time learning about as a professional. But when I was there as a student, I interacted with people who later recognized me as an official there, and that helped me better understand their issues. And I was able to work with them based on the relationships that I didn't necessarily establish, but the fact that they remembered me. And that gave me so much perspective. It made me feel so good because it shows more about them than me, right? It shows that these are people who are open. I made an impact on them, but they've opened so much of their culture, so much of their life to me that I can do my work and help them along the way.
So you had people that you met in Honduras, Roatan, on that enrichment voyage that years later remembered you?
Yeah.
To work there?
That's right. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, how many years between those two events was it?
It was 6 years, 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I'd never heard that story.
Yeah. I mean, because you don't think about it, but you think about, your interaction with people, how do you interact with people, right? There was, so another story is that one of the Foreign Service officers that did our briefing in China, I ended up working with, and I said, "Oh, you look so familiar. You look so familiar. You look so familiar." And I went back in all my old pictures, and I said, "You did my briefing when I was in college on semester at sea." I was talking to my supervisor the other day, and her husband did it when the ship docked in Cuba. Semester at sea has such a wide network in so many fields. I mean, I'm just talking about it in my profession, but anyone who works in any kind of cultural or social or international organization, I'm sure everyone has a semester at sea story. When I went to grad school, my roommate, I'm in Bologna, Italy. My roommate was a 2005 semester at sea alum. I've come in contact with other people who were on semester at sea. I went, when we got off the voyage, I went up to Mackinac Island on vacation with my mom, and it was a young lady up there, and she was on our voyage, and she's like, "Cameron," I was like, "Hey."
I mean, do some of those connections that you made through that all those years ago still help you in your job today?
Well, maybe not specifically in my job, but from a personal level, like so, our East Coast contingent is very strong, and being in Washington D.C., the folks I get a chance, this time last year we were up in Baltimore at Sahil's house, and it was like 8 of us, and we were just having such a good time connecting. And when I came back to DC, evacuated now, they were the first one. They were like, download House Party. We're going to meet. We're going to talk. We're going to catch up. I mean, and it's wonderful. It's the alumni network and the friends that I've made on Semester at Sea are probably some of my closest friends, and we'll be friends for life. And I'm thankful. They call me sometimes. I'll be on the other side of the world, and Cam, how you doing? I'm just giving you a call. How are you? I did a program. They came up to Princeton when I did a summer program after our voyage. Went out for my birthday. And they travel. That's not something that I was used to, but they travel. We do stuff together. It's fun because we all had this experience. We don't want to lose it because it was life-changing.
Definitely was life-changing. I know we all stories for days with that.
Yeah.
I do know that, I mean, some of the people I know on here listening are a little more curious. How has your semester at sea experience how did that help and aid you through the process of getting into foreign policy and some of the jobs that you have? And for those who want to make those steps, what do they need to do next to get into foreign policy?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're interested in the State Department, I would recommend you definitely visit careers.state.gov. Learn about the Foreign Service Officer Test, the Foreign Officer Oral Exam. It's a multi-step process, and the earlier that you learn about what the steps are, the easier it is, because some people take it cold. Some people are they like to prepare a little bit more, but I mean, it can be a 6 to 8 month to even up a year-long process, and you can only take the exam twice a year. If you're interested in foreign affairs and you've done semester at sea, or you want to do semester at sea, I think it can only make the situation better. Like I said, I was a Pickering fellow, so I was already, had already, dotted my I's and crossed my T's, and it was just a matter of finishing a few of the prerequisites to enter the Foreign Service, but I already knew what my path was. And so I used every experience from meeting the folks that was doing the diplomatic briefings, to learning more about cultures, to taking these very academically rigorous courses to inform my worldview, so I can be a much stronger officer when I entered my career. But you don't necessarily need that. I have a lot of colleagues who are former music teachers. My boss, he was a teacher, and my boss's boss was an entertainment attorney. So in order to serve the country, you don't need to have a particular skill set. You just need to have a love for country. It's better to have an understanding of how everything works in our government, civics and history and those types of things, and to be a good writer. That's another thing that I probably didn't mention, but I worked on my writing a lot, and my communication skills. We had a lot of really great opportunities for class to write papers, give presentations especially for those parents on the call who are wondering, is this really a study abroad program? For me, it was some of my toughest classes were on the ship, but it was also rewarding. That's why I loved it so much.
Do you think I know you said some of the people you work with were music teachers or entertainment lawyers and other professions, but I mean, do you feel your experience with semester at sea has helped, potentially give you a little bit of a leg up or some better experience to kind of be as successful as you've been?
I would definitely attribute, my at least some of my professional success to the experiences that I had on semester at sea. Absolutely, without a doubt. Like I said, it gave me a well-rounded global perspective. Where if I studied, like I said, I studied international economics and foreign policy, so that's a very specific way of looking at the world. But if you don't build anything into that framework, if you look at the world like ones and zeros, and you can't color that perspective. I can look at a country and I can understand how its economy works. I can understand what security policy is toward that country. But if you don't inform your perspective with what are the social cultural dynamics, and what do the people value, what do people care about, what do people do, what do they eat, you're missing out. You're really missing out on being as effective as you can at understanding and knowing the world.
And I know those people that we interact with have a big impact on us, and some stick around in your minds longer than others. I know Don always talked about there's that toothbrush person.
Yeah.
Person that, you're going to think about in those times when you're brushing your teeth every day. Do you remember who your toothbrush person was from the voyage?
Yeah, my toothbrush person, and I never got my letter. I know everyone, we were supposed to send out these letters and get it, but I never got mine. So my toothbrush person.
For that. I got mine back.
Yeah, I think I was the only one who didn't get. I maybe misspelled my street name or something. I don't know. So my toothbrush person was Mr. Phuc. Mr. Phuc was the tour guide in Vietnam whose family we lived with in the Mekong Delta. Mr. Phuc, he said something profound to me that colored a lot of my understanding of the world after leaving Vietnam, was that, we may not have a lot of money, but we're happy. And, coming from the perspective that I came from, I grew up and we didn't necessarily have a lot of money. I'm from Detroit. And so, hard work is really in our blood. And to know that, these people work hard, they still may not have a lot of money, but they're happy, really taught me. I was like, I take pride in my work and I'm happy. And he was there with his family and he shared so much of, his life with us, at least for those 2 nights. And, at 20 years old, that it really stuck with me here. And even at 30, it was very meaningful, and it meant so much to know that Mr. Phuc, he feels that way, he lives that way. And maybe that was the initial attraction to come back to Vietnam and to serve there.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, how people live in some of the different cultures is always baffling to many Americans. To go, you live how, and here's your house that only has half walls, that the bedroom's in the back and the kitchen's just in the front, but that's also like a community place that people come to eat, and surprises a lot of people and changes that perspective. I mean, in that perspective, when you went to South Africa and spent time in the townships, did you see a big difference between some of we don't have much, but we're happy with it from Vietnam, to a different perspective when you worked in the townships in South Africa?
So I didn't. So we met. So we stayed in Hout Bay, right, which is maybe a community in Cape Town. It's adjacent to some of the townships, but we didn't go into the townships. It's interesting you say that, because I was in South Africa this past November, and I did visit some of the townships. And though I think, how do I say this? Vulnerable populations live very differently in different places. People live certain ways because of certain things that are systemic. We see that in our country. We see that all over the world. South Africa is one of those places where you have a great difference in the way that people live because of historical reasons, because of planning. There's a lot of reasons why townships have developed the way that they have, which is different than how people perhaps in southern Vietnam, their housing has come up. One thing that I always remind myself is, we're very blessed to be in a situation where we have complete control, for the most part, of our destiny. I can always try to study and better myself and try to earn more money and work with people who are just as educated as I am to try to change my situation. There are people all over the world who they don't necessarily have that freedom. Seeing the way people deal with that situation informs me more than anything else, because we take a lot of the freedoms and the liberties that we have for granted sometimes in the United States, right? So if I'm a disadvantaged youth in a very poor nation, and I want to go to a school, the school may be 10 miles away. And so there needs to be something in me to do that, unless someone's going to help me. For us in the United States, I mean, I'm sure you remember when you were 10 years old, you probably didn't want to go to school. And there's a bus that came and picked you up and they fed you and you go for the day. You think about how blessed we are as a people, as a nation, as a country, but also you look at who you are in the world and where do you fit in, perhaps in the possibility to give back, right? And that's why it was important for me to do that enrichment voyage in the fall and the winter of that year, because we were able to do volunteer work. We, when we went to India to do volunteer work. Later on, when I was in graduate school, I went back to Honduras and I did volunteer work. There are places in the world where people are really trying to better themselves. And the perspectives that we got on the ship, I think motivated me even more to lend a helping hand, because I'll lend a hand in my community, but I can also lend a hand in a community that's influenced, my global perspective.
What's been one of the more rewarding communities that you've been able to give back to and work with?
I think, it's not at all related to the ship, but nothing gave me a better experience than getting up every Saturday when I was in college and going down to the soup kitchen in Atlanta. It all starts at home. I'm of that opinion. Like, if it wasn't for doing the soup kitchen when I was a freshman and a sophomore, I may not have valued, speaking to the young girls in India, or, talking to the young men in South Africa or Brazil. So I would say Atlanta, the different work that I do now in Detroit with, helping young people find scholarships, helping my mom with young people finding scholarships for school, talking to the young men. You and I are both very active in our fraternities. You more than me, because I'm just not here as much. But anytime that I get to interact with my community, we see what's going on right now. So, I like to make sure that I'm present in the African-American community, at least for young men. And then after that, exposing them to the experiences like I did with Semester at Sea. On the enrichment voyage, we brought 40 other African-American men from Morehouse College on that enrichment voyage. And it meant so much for me because I was already an alumnus. So even though I hadn't been to Central America, here we are, Christmas Day and the Panama Canal, and I'm, leading one of the classes, and I'm discussing about Semester at Sea, and I'm sharing experiences about, my shipboard education. And although I was only 6 months out of the spring 2010 voyage, it meant so much for me to share that experience with other people that look like me, to help inform their perspective so they can have the same experience as I did.
That's awesome. I had no idea that you guys took 40 individuals from Morehouse.
Yeah, it was about 40 in that voyage. Yeah.
Have some of the guys that you took with you, have you heard great stories of what they've been up to since then?
Yeah. I've seen a few. So, a lot of those guys are working in finance. They, I can't say if it encouraged them to take a more broader approach to their careers, but we do still share stories. And I can put you in contact with those guys because I know that Semester at Sea meant a lot for them, just as much as it meant for me.
And we're always trying to bring everyone back in and get them re-engaged. And we want to hear everybody's stories and experiences and how that has helped to impact and kind of drive and direct part of your life since you got off the ship. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a big part for all of us. Like I said earlier, I don't know if I would like the person I would be if I didn't go on that voyage because of all the transformative experiences it gave to us.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
I mean, and as we're getting close to taking up an hour of your time here this evening on that, I wanted to just let you kind of share some advice that you'd like to give to our community in terms of what it meant to you as part of the program, what the program needs, or really the work in foreign service and what you're seeing and the kind of people we may need more of in the work that you're doing.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that this is a great forum to spread the message about how transformative of experience it is, because maybe sometimes semester at sea gets a bad rep that we're not doing anything, uh, on the ship but partying. That's not all true. We were college students, but there's nothing like getting up in the morning, going out to a different country with a friend, somebody that you don't necessarily know, and experiencing something that you wouldn't have experienced it, and sharing it with each other, sharing it with your community, sharing it with your parents who maybe did not have the opportunity to travel because they sacrificed so much for you. Just kind of going back to giving back, right? So this is an experience that gave me so much, right? So I'm going to make a pledge to donate, because I know that it's needed. It's needed. There was a scholarship for I don't know if you still have it, but I'll give into the general fund. But I know that there was an effort to get more diverse people on the ship, to get greater Black Americans, African Americans participating on the ship, having that experience, because I think it's important. That was one of my main takeaways from my career, from my my study abroad experience on semester C and otherwise, is that I would love if more Black Americans got the opportunity to exchange for intercultural and international exchange, because there are so many misconceptions about the United States. There are so many misconceptions about Black Americans, that I like to think that I was an ambassador of sorts, of my community, not only to myself, not only to other countries, but to the people on the ship. Like I said, a lot of us came from different backgrounds. There was a guy in the room next to me. He was from Michigan. He was from a part of Michigan that I had never even heard of. And I was from a part of Michigan that he would have never thought about visiting. And just the interaction that we had, the breaking down of barriers, it crossed race, color, ethnicity. I can't say anything more about the importance of bringing people together and giving them a shared experience. I thank you all for that. At Semester at Sea, I'm going to give my donations. I challenge other alumni to also give. My folks who are in the East Coast alumni group, we'll talk about it tonight. Maybe we'll we'll put together like a nice package, but it's definitely important to give back to Semester at Sea and to your communities, because it'll inform your global perspective and it'll help you be better.
And we appreciate all of that and the perspective and work you've brought. And on top of your donation, I'm going to probably wrangle you into working with our diversity peer mentoring program, which helps prospective students and students who are going to be sailing to ask some of those questions with individuals that they relate with, in terms of what was your experience like? How did you make it work? How were the conversations? What was it going into port, being a Black individual going into Asia? How you experienced that and worked with it. The Diversity Peer Mentor Program really helps the younger students with getting more comfortable and how to work through some of those difficulties and challenges. So
Sign me up.
You into that as well.
Sign me up.
Yeah. Well, as we're getting to the end of the hour here, Cameron, it's great to see you. And it's been a pleasure to spend an hour of time with you this evening. I appreciate you being as open and honest with the alumni group as you have. It's great to hear your stories and hear about how much Semester at Sea has impacted your work in foreign policy and what you're doing as an ambassador around the world. So really appreciate you taking the time to share with us this evening.
Thank you for having me. Anything I can do to help, I'm looking forward to giving back and doing what I can. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for letting me relive some of those great memories from 10 years ago.
Been crazy, it's 10 years, but we'll relive it a little more.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us on this evening's Semester at Sea Wavelengths series. Make sure to jump back in next Wednesday to see the next installment. I hope you all have a good evening.